Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hello, everybody. This is Guineith speaking here, calling from Australia. I'm keeping the chair warm for Vincent again this week. He's got other stuff going on in his life at the moment. If you'd like to give us a call, the phone number is 866-582-9933. I'm pretty sure it's Brad that is engineering the broadcast this morning, and he's doing a really good job, and I think that's in Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. If I've made a mistake, then, well, there we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, we have today, once again, this is Tuesday, so normally it would be me on the air, but obviously I'm here, so I can't interview myself. Here's Rick Scheben, once again today. Hello there, Rick. How are you?
Doing great, Guineith. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I don't have any complaints. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's going to be a little warm for my taste. Supposed to be about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 32 degrees centigrade for you folks listening in Australia. And, it's kind of warm, but I think summer's going to be a short timer now, and hopefully in a couple of weeks we're going to start seeing some fall temps.
Yep. With us, it's going to be the reverse. We've only got a couple of weeks of winter-type weather left. And, and then we'll be heading into spring-type weather. With regards to rainfall, it's now the end of August, so we'll probably have some rain in September, and then that will be us for rainfall, basically, until maybe next May, next year. So,
wow.
April or May. So the rainfall basically that we get in the next 4 weeks has to see us through until April or May of next year.
Wow.
Yep. There's 6 months. That's it's basically very, very little rainfall. We might get 10 millimeters. That's like a third. Just under a third of an inch, just over a third of an inch a month in each of those months, if we're lucky. But often there's nothing at all in that time period. This is what people have to take account of if they are moving into an arid or a semi-arid area. Sometimes there's very little rain at all during the winter. Sometimes I think the record low we had was, for the last 6 years or something, was not last winter, but the winter before, and I think it was about 200 millimeters, which is probably about not even 10 inches. That's not much rain.
No.
That's not much rain at all. That's about 8 inches of rain for the year.
When do you have fire issues? Forest fires and stuff like that?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have, forest fires are a big deal. And we can get forest fires any time from basically October on. It only takes a couple of weeks for the place to dry out, and any time from October through to basically April is bushfire season. And our place is built on a valley, which actually makes it worse for bushfires in one way. In another way, it's sort of, where the bushfire is going to come from. It's going to come from, if it comes from anywhere, it's going to come up the valley. And, but if it ever did, it would just go whoosh. It would be like, quite literally like a freight train.
Wow.
And in the past, I've been very, very close to a very large bushfire many years ago when I was living in Queensland. And they say that a forest fire sounds like a freight train when you're right next to it, and it's absolutely true. We were only about 150 metres from this forest fire. We were on one island in southeast Queensland, and it was on another island, and there was a sea passage between us, but the embers from this bushfire were jumping the passage, and they were actually going straight over the top of the mangroves and landing on the dry grass. And at that time, my husband was still alive, and I was pregnant. I was either pregnant with my second son, or he was a very small, but I think I was pregnant with him. And I had my other son being a toddler, and we had 6 small children between toddler size and teenage, and 1 adult child with us, which was my husband's son, and by a first marriage. And we had everybody running around putting out embers, and you didn't have to explain to them that this was something they really needed to focus on at the moment, because, it was not a comfortable position to be on a sea island with a bushfire raging so close. It would have wiped us out. We would have had nowhere to go except into the water.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway, if you are ever in that unfortunate position, if I ever knew that there was we've got a saying here, within cooey. That means that you got a call that you have in the Australian bush, and it's something like cooey, but it's louder. And if you were ever within range of a bushfire here, I would have the radio on. I would have, I would know about it, and we would not hang around. We would be out of here. Mm-hmm. But it's very, very sad. You can't defend against a bushfire through something like a eucalyptus forest or a pine forest. And they've got a saying here in Australia, you have to decide whether you're going to stay or go. And, yeah, that's basically how it is. And if you're going to leave, you have to leave early. That means if you're still there and the bushfire is 5 kilometres away, then you've probably left it too late. That's how quickly the bushfires travel around here, especially on a day of high winds.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, do you have a bushfire problem where you are? Forest fire problem?
Well, we do have forest fire problems in most of the West. We are considered high mountain desert here in Montana. And we do have issues. In fact, we've had, I sent some pictures, my neighbor just the other day took some pictures of the northern lights that came out at 3 o'clock in the morning. I sent it to Vince, and I can send it to you if you'd like, with forest fires in the foreground that were almost out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was kind of a neat picture, but we do have those issues. It is a dry state, especially in July and August, which are probably my 2 least favorite months of the year. And that's one of the reasons I'm in the Northern Rockies, because I enjoy colder temperatures. In fact, my favorite temperature range is probably between 40 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's when I get the most done. There's a lot of things to do out in the woods, and fishing and hunting, and so that's what the lifestyle that I enjoy. But yeah, it's always an issue. Every area has its issues. It could be hurricanes, could be tornadoes, could be flooding. There's no perfect spot in the world, right, Guineith?
That's absolutely the truth. And you know something? I realized that early on in my life. I actually grew up in a town called Rotorua in New Zealand, and there it's an absolutely beautiful climate. It's never really too hot or too cold. Their maximum temperature their new record now is about 30, but prior to that it had never gotten higher than about 26 or 27 degrees centigrade. And it never gets any colder than about 6 or 7 degrees minus centigrade at night. And, but their little issue is that they're built inside a volcanic crater. So it's like somebody decided at some time in the ancient past they came across an ancient Yellowstone area, and they decided that here would be a nice place to build a city. So that's, it's as if somebody just plonked a city on the top of Yellowstone National Park.
Oh boy!
And that's quite literally how it is. So yeah, that has its own predictable issues as well. So I grew up, hearing about people would occasionally get gassed in their own home because a geothermal vent had erupted in their underfloor space in the middle of the night and, gassed them all to death. But yeah, that you learn to live with that risk, and I realised by the time I was about 9 or 10 that actually this is a nice area to live. Soil's hugely fertile, of course, and if we all get blown to smithereens, well, que sera, sera. That's a good attitude to have in life too. Everybody, this is Guineith Isaac speaking here. Speaking with Rich Scheben, and we're speaking about bushfires, or forest fires as they're called in the United States, and what you should do in a forest fire. A great deal depends on your level of preparedness. We have, I've got children, and I'm a single mother, and if you're a single mother with children, it's probably a good idea to not try and fight the bushfire, and because you can replace a house, you can replace fences, you can replace sheds and barns and whatever. What you can't replace is your own life. And, the land will still be there. You can rebuild, but, you can't save, you get one shot at this life, and you have to be aware how absolutely frighteningly quickly a forest fire can move. I said that if I found out that there was a forest fire within 5 kilometres, we would be out of here. That's the absolute truth. Because here, we had, not very far from here, a bushfire about 2011, 2012, and they were called the Black Saturday bushfires. And in extent, they were all the way from Marysville, southeast of Melbourne, all the way to Bendigo, and that's a huge distance. That's like 300-400 kilometres wide in area, and they had people who didn't even know that the fire was there, and the fire came through like a hurricane, quite literally at hurricane-type speeds, or fire tornadoes, which is something that happens in Australia from time to time, and it's like having your house hit by a tornado made of fire. And of course, there's nothing left of the house. And in that sort of circumstance, the people generally get very little warning that there's anything wrong, and it's just bang. And it's a funny thing because 100 metres away, there will be absolutely no damage whatsoever. And this is the extraordinary thing with Australian bushfires. I don't know if American bushfires are like that or not. Rick Scheben.
Well, Guineith, what I do, living off grid is very important for fighting fires, because the first thing that goes down is the electric grid when a fire comes through. So if you want a chance on fighting and saving something, living off grid is very important. Secondly, I didn't put my cabin on a ridge. I put it in a meadow with ridges surrounding me. Typically, unless it's a heavy wind in a particular direction, fires usually go with more ferocity uphill than they do going downhill. Next, I make sure that I cut every tree large enough that could fall near my cabin.
Yeah.
So basically, and I have goats, which eats my pasture around my cabin, so it keeps the ground fire probability very low of reaching my cabin. So I do a lot of things that is necessary, and I'm sure my insurance company appreciates that. And I don't even, this time of year, we do a lot of Dutch oven cooking in the fire pit. I'm not doing any of that. We're not going to light the wood stove, which you don't need to when it's hot anyway. But, it's just, a lot of it's common sense and logic as well. But what I wouldn't mind talking about, Guineith, is, remember we talked about this yesterday, talking about some ideas and solutions that are outside the box thinking for the bottom 93% of people. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, well, we're heading into another break. That's the bottom of the hour, but I'm happy to spend the rest of the broadcast on that, because that's a really, really important topic.
Super.
Yep. Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you then.
You bet.
Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking here, calling from Australia, and keeping the seat warm for Vincent this week. And we have Rick Scheben, and I keep wanting to call you Doctor because we've got so many other doctors on the show. But something, you do have a huge amount of knowledge, and if they could have a doctorate in preparedness, you'd probably be it. You know that, Rick? You'd have so much knowledge there. And, we need to spend some time just discussing how the preparedness lifestyle can help the bottom 93%, of
Absolutely.
people, because it's a lifestyle that actually is really hugely empowering for you. It's like this. You have got so many ruined houses all across the United States. You've got millions and millions and millions of them. And on our farm here, we've got a ruined farmhouse, and I'm gradually in the process of fixing it up. Now, why would I do that? Because I already have a house to live in. But the thing is, it's about maintaining the infrastructure on the place, and it's much better if you have two houses on a property than if you have one. Especially the fact is my boys are getting older, and they're going to be going into their late teens. They'll either stay here or they'll go. This house that's getting fixed up is a smaller house, and I was saying to myself, well, I could probably live in that smaller house as a single woman, and the boys maybe could have this bigger house to live in when they are young adults. And that's going to be a more suitable way of doing things. But the thing is you know, we're kind of in an interesting cash flow situation. You know, there's a circumstance in life which is real estate rich and cash poor. And that would probably describe us. And so you've just got to do little by little and piece by piece. And it includes, you know, any time that we go out, I usually try and buy at least one tree in planting season, that is, not during the middle of summer, but when we get the 6 or 7 months that it actually rains, and also some herbs or some seeds. They don't cost much. I might spend $20 or $30 or $50, but each week that builds up. It gets taken home, gets immediately planted on the property, and that tree will be there forever. It might make olives, it might make lemons, it might make hazelnuts or walnuts or some other type of nut. It might make fruit, and all of that into the future is actually going to be a tremendous help to us. And that's how an example of how you could do it. As the bottom 93%, you know, living a pretty basic lifestyle, but gradually accumulating to where you have a preparedness-centered outlook on life, and you're probably going to be okay, no matter where you are. Rick Scheben.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be honest with you. With everything that's coming down the pike here with demographics, our debt situation, the credit crunch that we're in, the credit collapse, the lack of pensions, all the valuation headwinds and the future rates of growth look really bleak. Never mind global debt, corporate debt, household debt, government promises. All the books are cooked and the game is rigged. So we have to think outside the box. You look at the demographics, the corruption and manipulation from the central banks, Keynesian economics, and group identity politics. It pretty much eliminates for the great majority of people the ability to control their own destiny. So when I talk about things that you need to prepare for, and I do this in talks or radio shows, the first thing I need to say is it depends. It's almost like a disclaimer, because there's different criteria for different people. Some people have different skill sets. Some people have different capital resources. Some people are willing to change their life and learn new lifestyles. And there's age, there's health, and other criteria which could compromise or change people's plans of action. So that being said, the first thing I talk about is skill sets. You need to think for yourself. You need to read, research, ask questions, listen, and share information. When I talk about skill sets, college to me is a big question mark. Now, I have 3 college degrees, and I've lost, for those of you who have heard me on different radio shows and Vince's show, I've had a lot of bouts with affirmative action and quotas, which has destroyed quite a few careers and a good portion of my health. And from the research I've done, 90% of the college degrees are absolutely worthless. Now, if you're going to be a certain specific type of engineer, if you're going to be a nurse, you know, there are certain jobs that pay well and have a good opportunity. But you look at the time lost from time leverage and the cost of college. Most kids, when they get out of college, they're forced to be a renter, okay, which that's what the aristocracy wants. It's an aristocracy-serfdom relationship. They want you to be a renter, and so that you can be controlled. They want to push you into urban, suburban America so you can be controlled. They do not want to cultivate independent thinkers. They want to cultivate followers. They do not want self-sufficiency, communication, and people who can do certain things on themselves. They want a dependent system. So when you have land, okay, we're buying rural property, and if anybody's interested in Northwest Montana, you can contact me at rich@offgridmontana.com. I do sell a piece of land here and there. So that being said, rural property and acreage, to me, with what's coming down the pike, which I think is going to be possibly a very big recession, if not the worst depression America's ever seen. I think we have a 50-50 shot. Yes, of going
Absolutely
into a 20-year, yes, possible very bad depression. But when you own rural land, when you own acreage, and you can set up a solar array, you can have a garden, you learn how to preserve food, raise animals, harvest edible and medicinal plants, hunting and fishing. These are all skill sets that are 19th century based that America has forgotten. We need to relearn those skill sets, but dovetail them with 21st century technology. For example, my solar array is electronic. So I use 21st century technology, even though I live similarly to 19th century times. And it's so important for me. Now, this is my skill sets, my preparedness menu for me, for Rich Scheben. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is being debt-free. The only thing,
absolutely.
and I highlight this in the book, I talk about this all the time, the only thing a person should be in debt for is house and land. That's it. Okay, not furniture, not vacations, not cars, not, frivolous things. When you start buying things like food and inanimate objects on time, then you're really behind the eight ball. And I also recommend maybe diversifying your portfolio, maybe 10% in silver and gold, maybe a little bit of cash, maybe a little bit of U.S. Treasuries. Cryptocurrencies, I've done a lot of reading on them. There's over 800 out there. The UN and the big banks want it. To me, those are red flags. That means they have backdoors for manipulation and confiscation. They're not going to admit that, but everything about the future regarding finance and economics is speculation and hedging. So I think when all this is said and done, I think there will be a cryptocurrency because, or who knows what they're going to call it, because the fascist system, the aristocracy versus the serfs, want to get rid of cash. They want a digital currency. And when we get to that point, I think anonymity will be absolutely gone, and that's one of the biggest reasons why people go with a cryptocurrency. So I think that's going to be false and phony if you think you're going to have anonymity or privacy. I think it's so important to be around like-minded people. If the crapper hits the phone, the whole system breaks down.
It's
whether
a
it be war, whether it be financial, whether it be, no one's going to. I don't care what skills. I don't care if you're a 25-year-old Navy SEAL. I don't care if you can run 100 yards in 2 seconds. I don't care anything. You're not going to do it alone if the crapper hits the fan. Whether it be an EMP, it doesn't matter. So when I talk to people and they say, "Oh, I bought silver 5-10 years ago, and I spent 99% of my liquid cash on this investment, and it's gone down." You got to remember, that's why I say 10%. This is my personal opinion, but you got to remember, silver and gold is the most manipulated, corrupted commodity market in the world. Okay? The powers that be do not want you to have silver and gold. Okay? So they do not want barter. They want to control you. It's an addiction of power, money, and control. So when you have 9 days of food in your home or wherever you store your food, and you've spent all your money on silver or gold, I think that's a very poor balance of resources.
Precarious.
Yes, and this is why the balance in life, I talk about this too, there's got to be a balance between hard work and the benefits of time and enjoying your interests and hobbies and cultivating those interests and hobbies, especially if it like gardening or hunting and fishing, if it could be a lifesaver. And even Clint Eastwood says that political correctness has destroyed humor in America. And that's one of the reasons why there's so much despair. And I mention this on the air as often as I can. The number one cause of death in America, folks, people 50 and under, is drug overdose. And the biggest imbalance in life, especially with our young people, is the imbalance between nature and technology. That's a big problem. Yep. We need to go back in time and learn some new skills. Guineith?
Yep, no, that's great. I think that, I don't know if we're at the top of the hour or not, are we?
It looks like it.
One more segment.
No. Okay. We got one more segment.
This is Guineith Isaacs. speaking here. I'm sitting in for Vincent this week. He's got stuff in his life of his own going on. And I'm here in Australia. Rick Scheben is in Montana in the United States. And we're having a discussion about what you can do as the bottom 97% of people out there, and how you can actually get by and have a really, really good life in this world. Now, Rick, I have a university degree as well. I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Melbourne in Environmental Science and Geography. Now, that has been really, really useful in my preparedness life, but I've never used it professionally. But with regards to understanding ecosystems and understanding how to live in place in the Australian environment, to be educated by some of the top ecologists in the country for 4.5 years was definitely worthwhile. And geologists and so on and so forth. But I've never used it professionally. That might be a degree that's not a waste of time. But even so, you have to bear in mind you may never get a job doing the thing that you graduated in. Rick Scheben.
Absolutely. You have to have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G today, because hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications barely matter.
Work.
It's more about group identity politics and carrying the narrative. And you get the CNN, NBC, ABC. You ever notice that the narrative carry on from the elites, which own all the media, 95% of the information? It goes from one television or radio station to the other in the mainstream media. Then shortly after that, it goes to the same message, sometimes the same words verbatim to a different country. That shows that it's an aristocracy serfdom relationship. Okay.
Yep.
It's not. People say it's all about ideology, left-right paradigm. It's very small ideology. It's mostly the aristocracy versus the serfs. Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Nazis, it's all being funded from the top down by the same people. The MO of the elite is to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation. That's why half of the mainstream media, race baits, sex baits, gender baits, this is what
Constantly.
They need chaos. They need infighting. That's how a divide and conquer system works. And then what happens is you lower the bars of standards and expectations. You basically insult, degrade, and disrespect certain groups, and then you destroy America from within because you reward mediocrity for decade after decade after decade. And then ingenuity, productivity, and innovation is only available for the elite. So we need to change things from the bottom up. The globalist playbook is very telegraphed. It's very easy to see. And they're using group identity politics, propaganda, to swaying public opinion, using the mainstream media that our attorneys and judges are bought and paid for to protect the fascist system, which is the big corporate oligarchy who's created an alliance with big government. So what we need to do is be, as the bottom 93%, we need to be frugal. Okay? Household corporations, big government is way in the red. We have to, if you don't spend anything unless you have the cash. We need to bring back the mentor-protege relationship and teach people about ideas and solutions. We need to reduce our tax rate. We need to confiscate all city parks and front yards and put gardens everywhere for the people and teach them skill sets and have communication and synergy again.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, we're at the top of the hour now. I'll see you on the other side of the news. It's so interesting what you've got to say there, and so relevant as well. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking here, sitting in this week for Vincent Finelli. And we have Rick Scheben in Montana, and his website is www.offgridmontana.com. And we were talking about preparedness and how it can help the bottom 97% of the population. Now, you know something? We have an excellent example of how preparedness can really, really help you. You know, you probably do know, Rick, what conjunctivitis is. It's a real nuisance, isn't it? Mm. It's just, you know, it clogs up your, you know, tear ducts, and you're just totally miserable. But we've had a dog here with conjunctivitis. Okay, and you know, it's just something. It's in the air. It's in the soil. It's just, you know, dust and all that sort of stuff. There's not much dust around now, but, you know, it's, you know, mud as well. And, you know, dogs, they roll around and they just get into some really grotty stuff sometimes. This dog ended up with something in its eye, and it developed conjunctivitis. And do you know something? There is a herb. This is an example of how preparedness could help you. You can spend hundreds of dollars at an eye doctor trying to get rid of conjunctivitis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just a real nuisance. There is a herb out there, and it's called clary sage. It's been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years for various eye conditions. It's soothing, and you know, it grows in your garden very, very easily because it is a salvia. And salvias are really hardy desert-type plants. They grow in Arizona, they grow in Mexico, they grow just about anywhere. And, you know, it doesn't matter if they, you know, I'm sure they're not totally frost-hardy, but they can take a little bit of frost, they can take a little bit of snow. You know, but like I say, they probably couldn't stand months and months of it. But there's this plant, clary sage. I knew about this plant, and you know, when I go out to the nursery, usually each week or each fortnight, I have a mental shopping list of herbs that I'm looking for, medicinal herbs, or culinary herbs that I'm looking for, and clary sage was on the list, and I saw one at the nursery, and it cost all of between about $3 and $5 to buy this little herb in a little, you know, seedling pot that you get. I brought it home, I put it in the garden, and of course it grew. You know, one of the animals developed conjunctivitis. I went out, I got 2 of the leaves of this plant, I got my mortar and pestle, I ground them up, and I filtered it, and mixed it with some warm saline water, made up a lotion, dripped it into the dog's eyes, and do you know something? Within hours, there was a vast improvement in, you know, that the swelling had gone down, the discharge had gone down, and I would say that probably within 3 to 5 days of this sort of treatment, that dog will be totally healed. That's an example of how a preparedness lifestyle of knowing about one simple little herb can mean the difference between possibly having a blind dog and a dog that continues to function in this world. So yeah, that's an example, and I'm sure you could have a zillion examples as well, Rick.
Oh, absolutely. I harvest red clover, which is an immune stimulant. I harvest the rose bud after it's flowered, after a frost comes through, and that's where you get the rose hips and the vitamin C. I harvest a wild mushroom that grows on birch trees, so I get the benefit of butylene and butylic acid. And there's so much. there's so much out there. I mean, we can do a couple of shows on this someday if you ever want to do it. But what it really does, nature makes you think. Nature makes you want to research. And speaking of nature, I'm going to go to my next idea, and it's basically a land business end game idea. And for those of you living in urban, suburban America who have a love of nature, who want to come out, live off grid, and do some of the things that me and Guineith are discussing today, I think this is a really good business plan, and that is to get like-minded people together. If you are young, you don't have enough capital resources, or even if you're old and you don't, get like-minded people together, buy land together, and put structures on it, put fencing on it, put animals on it, build gardens and raised beds and greenhouses, put up, animal fences for deer and elk, put outbuildings up, put a solar array up. One person could have skills as being a builder, and one person owns a backhoe, one person is older, has capital resources, a couple people are younger, but they have youth and strength, and they could be cheap labor. One person, yeah, absolutely. One person could have a job working online out of the home to bring cash flow into the group. And what I mean by endgame is what you need to do is create a situation where you can sell that property, and everything's got to be communicated and negotiated on paper, but say 5-10 years down the road, you sell that property, and everybody walks away with a piece of the action, discussed through negotiation on who put in X amount of capital resources, X amount of labor, X amount of ideas, et cetera. And this way, when you sell it, it's already discussed. It's on paper. There's no whining. There's no crying. And not only are you looking at it from a business perspective, but you can look at it from a skill. You cross-train each other, and you're learning all these different skills. Now, the economy that we're in, the elite, it's an analogy to the central banks around the world. All they want to do, they want to save the banks, they want to save the stock market / Wall Street, and they want to keep the status quo the way it is. In other words, they want to keep the incognito caste system. Okay? The powers that be have an addiction to power, money, and control. That's all they care about. Okay? I mean, even if you read the EU, the European Commission draft legislation, when they were talking about banning cash recently, in small print, it even says that privacy and anonymity does not constitute a fundamental human right. So this is where we're at. It's the aristocracy versus the serfs. When you hear people say, no, it's all ideology, it's not. Okay, you'll have some very wealthy, right-wing, conservative people who are good in a lot of ways, but they're going to say it's mostly ideology because they have a lot of money, and they don't want people to think it's an aristocracy-serfdom relationship. It is. It's about money, control, and power. Trust me. So
it absolutely is. And you know what annoyed the daylights out of just about everybody a couple of years ago when I was in conflict with the sex racketeering local police around here, who were issuing huge infringement notices to local women, including myself, and then basically saying that they would let off the notice if you let the cop come around to your house in the middle of the night. And I wouldn't agree to that, so they hated me. Something that's really funny how these sex racketeering cops will not go around and arrest the local pedophiles, even when they do horrendous crimes against children, and even though they know exactly who they are. That's it. It's a racketeering cartel, and of the very worst kind. It just absolutely is. People have to realize this. What you're saying is an excellent idea, for building a community, especially if you get the same group of people can then move on to another piece of land and do the same thing, okay, and develop that. And you do that 2 or 3 times over a period of 20 or 30 years, then you have a very, very wealthy community there. But the only thing is, what you've got to take account of is human nature, that people are greedy. and there will be somebody in that community who is not who you think they are, and there's always one. And this person is just about guaranteed to upset the apple cart. And you can be as careful as you like, but unfortunately that's how it is, and that our society actually encourages people to be like that. You know, they absolutely do. They actually reward that sort of bad behaviour, and then that person will go around and sue the rest of the community. What we have here, where we are, we have a small, what I call hippie enclave, where there's a small area, 20-acre allotments, okay, and surrounded by quite large sheep ranches. You know, some of the sheep ranches are 500 acres, some of them are 5,000 or 10,000 acres of land. But these small 20-acre allotments have been bought up by alternative lifestyle types over the years, and they have been developed with an end because, I mean, hippies, they have their faults, okay? They can be overly idealistic. But one thing is that they were actually, back in the 1960s and 1970s and 1980s, they were the original preppers. And if you can find an area like that, and if you can live with the fact that these people are going to, you know, maybe occasionally just sit around chanting and singing Kumbaya, then you'll have actually a very prepared community, because they've been doing it for a long, long time. Guineith speaking here. I'm sitting in this week for Vincent Finelli. I have Rick Scheben on the line, and we were talking about how to set up the structure. Rick had a marvelous idea of getting a community going out to buy land, and I was describing how things are around here. It's really, really interesting. The thing is, when people have their own freehold title over their own small parcel of land, I would consider 20 acres to be really quite small. For some people it might be huge, but you know, when you get to a preparedness lifestyle and you're figuring out where to put stuff, that 20 acres soon becomes pretty tiny, especially when you're thinking about things like woodlots and such like. And most of our block is one giant woodlot. Our farm is actually built into a eucalyptus forest. And you know, it's quite interesting because the people who live around here, they tend to think in a similar way, and it's preparedness minded. It's a type of preparedness minded, you know, that, you know, goes a tradition that goes back maybe 50 years to the 1960s, to the hippie movement, where there were people who could see that the society back then was falling apart. And, you know, we're a lot further down the track now. But they were the original constructors of the lifeboats. And if you can understand these, I'm not talking about the social justice warrior, wannabe urban type hippies that you get in universities, and I've certainly seen enough of them. I'm talking about people who have actually gone out there, had a job, got some resources together, and bought a place in the country because they could see that this system was ultimately unsustainable, and we've all got some really, really bad karma coming because of what our society has done. And if you can find an area like that that has like I say, maybe 10 or 20 acre parcels, maybe 50 acre parcels of land, and buy into that community with your own resources and capital, that can also be a good way to go, because the people in these communities, they tend to support each other, but they also tend to give each other their private space, and they're all on the same page, and they're generally quite hard-working people, but they know how to have a good time as well. Rick?
Absolutely, Guineith. And, that plan of action could be for all age groups, because if you're young, you have less capital resources / money, and you want to learn skills, you want to acquire something, you want to get a small business going, this is a great way to do it. And if you're old and you don't have the energy or the strength anymore to do certain labor, but you have some capital resources and you can buy into this, and you're always going to have communities and situations where people don't get along, and that's why you have to have an end game. You have to be able to sell that piece of property in 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 years, whatever the group decides, with the improvements that's been made on the property. And everything's negotiated beforehand. Everything's on paper. And that's the big mistake that most people make. They have this, kumbaya, sitting around the campfire, everything's going to be perfect. And they didn't have an end game on paper.
Before. Yep.
Absolutely.
Legally.
Yeah. And what I'd like to talk about next, Guineith, is kind of a light at the end of the tunnel program on fixing the economy. And that's one of the reasons I talk so much about finance and economy. And the book talks a little bit about that, because we're in a situation that we can't control our own destiny. It is the aristocracy versus the serfs. Obama gets millions of dollars for a Wall Street speech, plus favors and obligations, whatever that meant in the story. Hank Paulson, U.S. Treasury, printed $4 trillion to bail out Wall Street, big banks, auto manufacturing companies. 95% of that money, taxpayer money, went to the top 1 to 7%. We have to be able to control our own destiny, and I just want to talk about an economic idea for the next segment.
Yep, that'll be great. Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking here, keeping the seat warm for Vincent this week. And we have Rick Scheben, and we're discussing how to set up a community of people and how to actually fix things after the collapse has happened. By the way, Rick, I wanted to mention, I thought that your idea was actually a marvelous one. They've been doing that for many years, actually, here in Australia, and they call it multiple occupancy. And if you go on the internet and search up Australian multiple occupancy, you'll see that it's something like that has been happening for a while. It's a really, really good idea, and it can work well, but you're absolutely right. You've got to set up the proper legal structures at the beginning, or otherwise you are going to have problems, because interpersonal conflicts are going to arise, and they have to be resolved, because human beings are human beings. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that. And they can work really well, but you've got to plan it properly from the start. And there we go. Okay, what were you wanting to speak about next, Rick?
Well, and you hit the nail on the head, with having your ducks in a row financially on paper. And we need to renegotiate and communicate everything. I mean, we're learning social media and the push-button technology. We're learning, especially the young people, they're losing the ability to communicate properly. But I think this is a really good idea. This is one of the reasons I talk about economy. If everyone understood Economy 101, I promise you there would not be anybody who wants socialism, because socialism, communism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, dictatorships, fascism, this is all top-down control. We need to decentralize in every way, shape, or form. If we can't get the republic back here in America, then we need to do a Switzerland-type situation where the president and the official authorities have very little pull, and the people make the decisions. So what I want to talk about...
And we all look after ourselves.
So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit of an economic idea that I've mentioned on several shows before, and it could be a hybrid system like this. But see, the powers that be do not want people to understand economics. They do not want people to understand self-sufficiency or communication or negotiation. It's all about power, money, and control from the top down. And I'll just end. I'll start this with one Wall Street story. All minimum wage earners in America, in the country, made $14 billion. Wall Street bonuses, this is not regular salaries or regular compensation, Wall Street bonuses was $30 billion. So more than double, from a few hundred people getting more than double all of the minimum wage earners in America combined. See, this was done 7 years after the bottom 93% literally bailed out Wall Street and the big banks. So the too big to fail, the too big to jail seems like it's always going to dominate the little people. We can enforce sedition, treason, espionage laws real easy, but they're not doing that. You know, they're allowing the NGOs and the George Soroses and the deep pockets to literally buy violence, buy the brown shirts and the black shirts and the mercenaries to create havoc and infighting and turmoil in America. And this is how a divide and conquer strategy works. And this is why when we hear good ideas from people, we need to research these and read about them and grab a microphone. And what's killing us, we can blame the IMF, the central banks, we can blame the Bilderbergers, the Rothschilds, the Russians, and the mainstream media, the New World Order, the rhinos, the elites, the aristocracy, the feminists, the deep state, the powers that be. We can blame anybody we want. The big fault for the demise that we're in regarding the middle class and the lack of ability to control our own destiny, especially in regards to getting and keeping a job, is because of the silent majority.
Yeah, it's because of us.
Absolutely.
Because we let it happen as a community, you know. And you are absolutely right. And you know something, that said, in America you're actually in a much better position than what we are in here in Australia. Because at least in America there's a really, really high degree of awareness of these problems. If you go into your average American small town, everybody knows how crooked the sheriff is if he's a crooked sheriff. You go into Australia, and unless people have been directly impacted by the crooked police department, they don't have a clue. They think that everything is just normal, and I guess that goes back to the fact that we were set up as a nation as a prison colony, that people here still have this mindset. And I have conversations with friends on a fairly regular basis who have lived in Australia all their life, and I say to them, listen, you've got to be aware, you're enslaved. This is not a free country. This isn't, by no stretch of the imagination, a free country. And they said, oh, what do you mean? And I said, well, you can't see the difference. And I have this conversation with my children as well. You can't see the difference because this is all you've ever known. But I grew up in New Zealand, and New Zealand was not, well, you know, maybe a huge long time ago, but in the modern era, in the last few hundred years, New Zealand was not set up as a prison colony. New Zealand was set up as a free country, okay, where different racial and ethnic and linguistic groups made a treaty where they were going to have a country and they were going to live together side by side harmoniously. And people come to New Zealand, they go, wow, this is amazing, we've never been in a country like this. No, you haven't. Because the people there, they did on a national scale exactly what you were talking about with your multiple occupancy idea. And that was, you get different groups, different people with different skills, and maybe from vastly different backgrounds, and they get together and they agree that we are going to set up something beautiful here. And that's basically what happened in New Zealand's beginning. Because I spent the first 17 years of my life there, I can see the difference, and you find that a huge number of the Australian common law activists and people who are at the forefront of speaking out against this corrupt government we have here, where Malcolm Turnbull is literally a bankster prime minister. You look at his resume. If he was in America, he would have gone straight from Goldman Sachs into the White House. That's the degree of corrupt banksterism that we have here in this country, and people can't see it. And I want to just shake them and say, wake up, wake up. You need to realize that you have been enslaved, and you have been tricked.
Yeah.
And at least in America, you've got a president who actually is trying to do the right thing by all of you. We don't have that here, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and Trump said he wants to transfer power back to the people, so you got to ask yourself, folks, look at the wars. Most of them are started by false flags for the benefit of the bankers and the military-industrial complex hierarchy. Look at GMO foods, hormones, steroids, and antibiotics in your food, pesticides, fluoride, chlorine, 200 other chemicals in your water, the geoengineering. Do you really think with cancer rising thousands of %, you're in control of your own destiny? So what I want to do here is I want to give an economic solution. And if we did this, our economy would turn on very quickly. Now, there's always a lag time, and that's one of the reasons why they're trying to get rid of Trump, and they want to basically create the propaganda that it's all going to be his fault when it collapses. This has all been the whole system is artificially held up with central banks printing money out of thin air and stock buybacks, CEOs issuing bonds, basically throwing AAA bonds in with government bonds, with corporate bonds that are worthless. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but we all need to learn about economics 101. And if we did the following, first of all, break up all the big companies, eliminate lobbyists, anything that's under the category of oligarchy and monopoly, we need to get rid of it. People need to decide how much net worth an individual or corporation can have. Okay, right? Last year the number was 64. It's now 8. 8 people have a higher net worth than half of the world combined. Okay? When you have people creating NGOs and they have an addiction to power, money, and control, and they're literally funding hate groups, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Nazis, this is all done by the same people. It's all funded by the same people. We have to decentralize everything, not just government, but how we live, and that's one of the reasons to talk about living off-grid and rural. Okay? What we need, if we did the following, if we had negative interest rates, I think it could be a useful tool if we did the following. Banks still have a huge spread for cars and credit cards and loans, okay? Let's say we went to 2% negative interest, okay? We implemented Glass-Steagall back and dissected Dodd-Frank, okay? If we had means testing with this, which means if you had, say, under $1 million net worth, you don't get your money confiscated by these negative interest rate fees. And then instead of some countries going to 100-year bonds, if we went to a 100-year mortgage, people could have a life. More people in the database would be buying land and homes instead of being renters. And take that mean household debt and give that to each home. If you're in debt, you pay it off. If you're out of debt, you must spend it in a voucher to help prevent hyperinflation. If we dismantled the central banks and did the following, we would be in great shape.
Hello there, everyone. This is Guineith Isaac speaking, sitting in for Vincent Finelli all this week. We have Rick Scheben here, and we're discussing how we might put things back together after the collapse. Rick, Please continue. We've only got a few minutes left, and I would just like you to say whatever you want to say here.
All right, Guineith. Well, thank you. First of all, folks, the technocracy is killing us. Basically, the tools that the elite are using. I say get off of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all social media. It's basically an elite tool for self-incrimination of the people. The average American watches 7 to 8 hours of TV or smartphone use per day. Learn to garden. Learn to go out and camp. Learn edible medicinal plants. Maybe go fishing. Do different things that Americans used to do for many, many generations that made us great. We need to learn how to think again and not be cultivated how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. We need to implement practice what you preach laws. For example, if some elite person says we need to get rid of guns, and then they have the audacity to hire private security to carry guns, in a lot of cases using your taxpayer dollars, that should be illegal. If they say that you have to have a lower carbon footprint and they're flying around the world on jets, sometimes even private jets, that should be illegal. We can't use the words
34 mansions.
Absolutely. we cannot use the words hypocrisy, double standards, or say that's the way it is anymore. If you do that and stop right there, that's unacceptable. We have to basically teach the American people that everybody needs practice what you preach laws. And I think Congress should be eliminated from their secret pension and secret health care providers, and everybody should be under the same laws and have the same skin in the game. Unless we get together as a people and get the masses to read, research, learn, and speak up, then things are going to continue to get way, way worse. Because I'm telling you, we're heading into an apocalyptic economic scenario where we could be in very possibly the worst depression we've ever seen as Americans and Western world. Guineith?
Yep. I would absolutely agree with you there. I would full-on agree with apocalyptic collapse. Many years ago, before my husband died, he was a seer, and he was a Christian minister, and he had a mission. He started his life as a gangster. He became a Christian, and he then he went to Bible college, became a minister of religion, and then had a missionary to the gangsters. That was his mission. And he said, he was also a seer, and he said, this is how it's going to unwind in Australia. You need to go and watch the Mad Max series of movies, okay, because that is exactly how it's going to unwind here in Australia. And a lot of Americans don't realize there was actually a first Mad Max movie that Mel Gibson made probably about 3 or 4 years before the Mad Max movie that everybody in the Americas knows, okay? That first Mad Max movie lays a lot of the groundwork for what comes later. But we are full-on facing what you called an apocalyptic economic scenario, and what I would call Mad Max world. I think that it's pretty well the same thing. And I would not be living in a big city or even in a small country town right now, because it's all going to go south real quick. And as Vincent says, honesty and integrity, and the rest is up to you. And that's the end of the broadcast.
Thank you, Guineith.
That's all right. It doesn't last long, does it? It just flies.
It does.
See you later. Okay. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.